Digital recording has developed over the years into a highly accurate and consistent medium for capturing and processing audio. And of course, that's a good thing. But the classic pop recordings that defined the sound and style of modern pop music were made with analog equipment that lacked that level of precision. The analog electronics and magnetic tape recorders of the time introduced many nonlinearities into the signal as they recorded and processed the audio, and those very imperfections gave the resulting recordings a quality, often described as warmth and presence, that pristine digital recordings tend to lack. Qualities that make the sound more open and natural, organic in character. Ever since digital technology became the standard, artists, producers, and engineers have been looking for ways to recapture that quality. Vintage mics and analog processors like EQs and compressors have become highly prized additions to DAW-based recording setups, and reissues of this gear, along with other modern analog hardware, enjoy brisk sales to studios that want that extra something for their recordings. As computer power increased, the digital technique of modeling became feasible for plugins. This is where a piece of analog hardware is analyzed, the contribution of each physical component in the signal chain is determined, and a virtual signal path is designed in software, providing not only the sound of the real thing, but controls that duplicate the operation of the original as well. Carefully constructed models of the best analog hardware can sound virtually indistinguishable from the originals. And that's what Waves has done here, with their models of the Red consoles, Studer J37 tape recorder, RS56 passive EQ, and the components that contributed to the classic Abbey Road ADT effect, along with some modeled vintage mics as a bonus. But those plugins carefully recreate not only the physical components of this gear, but the operational aspects as well, so you have to know how to use them properly, as you would the actual hardware, to get the best from them. So what is it about analog gear that gives it this magical quality that so many people put so much effort into recreating and applying to modern recordings? There are four main elements of analog gear that contribute to that characteristic warmth and presence. The 4 T's, if you want. Tubes, transistors, transformers, and tape. Tubes are probably the most well-known analog component. When they're overdriven, they clip the audio waveform by gradually rounding off the tops and bottoms. This adds harmonic distortion, which, unlike some other types of distortion, like digital clipping, can impart a desirable edge to musical signals. While this is done to a great degree for obvious distortion in guitar amps, very small amounts of this rounded clipping can add harmonic richness to any signal without actually sounding like distortion. Tubes were used for all kinds of amplifier circuits in older studio gear, in consoles, preamps, EQs, compressors, lending that sweet edge to the music at all stages of the recording and mixing process. Most of the equipment used at Abbey Road during that classic era still utilized tube circuitry throughout, and that's one of the aspects recreated in this collection. If you know just how much to push levels through the virtual circuitry, you'll get a nice rich enhancement which can benefit just about any audio signal. And transistor circuits are generally considered to be harsher in quality when they're overdriven, but well-designed circuits with high-quality components, like FETs or FETs, can also add their own version of this euphonious harmonic richness. A component that's probably less familiar to many people is the transformer. Transformers use magnetic induction to pass a signal from one stage to the next in a variety of applications, with or without amplification. This process also typically adds its own sonic signature to the signal. Since transformers were widely used in older analog gear, this is another, often overlooked, contribution to analog sound. Magnetic tape recorders, of course, are one of the most nonlinear components of the traditional analog studio. Recordings are made by aligning magnetic particles on the tape to follow the changing shape of the audio wave. And when the signal reaches and exceeds the limits of these particles, tape saturation occurs. This is a gradual compression and clipping of the wave, which, if not overdone, imparts a subtle richness to the sound that, for years, was one of the most difficult aspects of analog sound to simulate. Fortunately, Waves has managed to do an excellent job of it here. And if you push the virtual recording levels to just the right amount, you'll get that elusive quality. But tape recorders, especially older ones, also had other inherent nonlinearities. As mechanical devices, they employed motors to regulate the speed of the tape, and this gave rise to speed variations and fluctuations that also contributed a degree of randomness, the slightly animated quality, like you might get from a very subtle use of modulation. Not only were these various nonlinearities present in all recordings to some degree, but when tape machines were pressed into service creatively to generate special effects, like flanging and doubling, those effects often had a subtly richer quality to them than what we're used to nowadays from our highly precise digital effects processors. I'll go into more detail on tape recorders when I cover the J37 and the Real ADT plugins, which both incorporate virtual tape nonlinearities to achieve their characteristic analog quality. Now, a lot of the beneficial aspects of analog sound can be pretty subtle, but they still contribute something, even if, maybe especially if, they don't jump out at the listener too much. And if a lot of tracks in a mix have this quality, the overall effect, while still subtle, can be a generally fuller, more open, more lively mix. And of course, any analog gear, real or virtual, can be pushed harder for much more obvious special effects. As I go through each of the Abbey Road plugins in turn, I'll return to the nonlinearities of analog gear, focusing on the operational aspects, how to push this virtual gear to just the right degree to get just the right amount of analog magic.